let's just get right into it. You employed people have no time to waste. First things first, y'all need to know the plot of Wuthering Heights as Emily Bronte intended. Wuthering Heights is a gothic novel written, of course, by Emily Bronte that was published in 1847. To give you the vibes right off the bat, it's a commentary on class, an exploration of generational trauma, and putting it very simply, a tale of two families becoming tragically intertwined. Strap yourselves in, y'all, it's about to get incestuous up in here. POV, it's the late 18th century in northern England. We have two neighboring families. Now, even though they're neighbors, their houses are miles apart from each other, so they're not all up close and personal yet. First, we have the Linton family residing at Thrushcross Grange. They are the more rich and refined of the two families, but not by an extreme margin. Then we have the Earnshaw family. They take center stage in the book and, of course, reside at Wuthering Heights. Each family consists of a mother, father, and a brother-sister children pair. The Earnshaw sibling pair is Hindley and Catherine, and the Linton sibling pair is Edgar and Isabella. All the kids are more or less the same ages except for Hindley, who's the oldest by like 6 to 8 years. Again, the primary focus is the Earnshaw family. When Hindley was about 14 and Catherine was about 6, something happened that would change their lives forever. The Earnshaw father was about to leave on a business trip, and before he left, he was all like, "Don't you worry, kiddos, I'll be back before you know it with some souvenirs." It was the night before he was supposed to return. The kids were eagerly awaiting by the door, and when it opened, surprise, the souvenir in question that the dad brought back from his travels was a dirty orphan boy. Father Earnshaw was like, "Can we keep him pretty, please?" Catherine, Hindley, Mama Earnshaw, and their housekeeper Nellie were all like, what the fuck, no, are you crazy? But Father Earnshaw is the head of the household, so low-key there was nothing they could really do about it. Against everyone's wishes, Father Earnshaw names the boy Heathcliff after his late infant son and starts raising him as his own. Heathcliff is pretty much the same age as Catherine, and as they continue to spend time together, she starts to come around. She's like, "You know what, Dad? I may have spoken too soon. Fine shit can stay. I'll allow it." On the other hand, Mama Earnshaw and Hindley were bitter bitches. They would never accept Heathcliff as part of their family, and they were not shy in making that known. But a couple years later, when Mama Earnshaw dies, Hindley is now bitter party of one. Like I said, with Father Earnshaw being the head of the household, Heathcliff was somewhat protected, but that didn't stop Hindley from bullying and resenting him. Hindley, of course, doesn't accept Heathcliff as his equal on a basic human level, but more than that, he's deeply resentful and jealous of his father's blatant favoritism towards Heathcliff, who again is just like a random orphan boy that he found. Seeing the conflict between Hindley and Heathcliff continue to worsen, Father Earnshaw ships Hindley off to college. He's like, "You know what? Get out of town." Meanwhile, Catherine and Heathcliff get a reputation for being little rascals. They just get into mischief, frolicking through the moors. They continue to grow closer. Then, when they're around the age of like 12, Father Earnshaw dies, and they grieve him together like this was a traumatic experience for them, and this is where things very much take a turn for the worse, particularly for Heathcliff. Because Father Earnshaw dying means that Hindley has to come back into town to take up his role as the new head of the household, and he comes back with a wife in tow. Her name is Frances. Nobody knows who she is or where she even came from, but now that Daddy's dead, Hindley can be his bitter bitch self to the fullest. The hatred in his heart is still very much there and thriving. As such, he reduced Heathcliff to the status of a servant, stripped him of any chance at getting a proper education, and physically abused him. He wanted the class distinctions to be real clear. Catherine and Heathcliff were still chill though, until one day they were up to their usual mischief, except this time they had the bright idea to spy on their neighbors. Yes, that's right, the Lintons are finally coming into play, but they weren't being sneaky enough about it and were caught. More specifically, Catherine's ankle was caught between the jaws of the Lintons' dog. The dog mistook them for burglars or something, so even though it was an accident, Catherine was of course injured and needed weeks to recover. The scary thing is, accidents can happen at any time. If you've ever been hurt or in an accident, your case could actually be worth millions. Unfortunately, many people never file a claim, or they end up getting lowballed by insurance companies. But Morgan & Morgan believes that if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve fair compensation. That's why, if you end up working with them, they'll fight to get you the money you deserve. There's a reason you don't trust clickbait for the full story. Just like there's a reason that Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle. They've got more than 1,000 lawyers and 100 offices nationwide with over $30 billion recovered for their clients, and have a proven track record of fighting for over 35 years. Morgan & Morgan was founded with the mission to work for the people, protecting those who might otherwise get shortchanged, and doing so with compassion, transparency, and no upfront fees. Not all law firms are the same. Hire the wrong one and you may be beat before you even start. If you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan, and by the way, their fee is completely free unless they win. For more information, you can go to forthepeople.com/Amanda Toddhunter. Thank you so much to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to it. So after this incident, aka the bite of 77, the Lintons immediately shooed Heathcliff away, but proceeded to abduct Catherine into their home, and then Catherine finally returned to Wuthering Heights over a month later. And not only that, she's a brand new woman. No longer is she a wild child roaming the moors with some servant boy. She's a lady with manners and etiquette and, dare I say, class. She is still like 12 though, mind you, so don't get it twisted. In terms of Heathcliff, this is the moment where he starts to lose everything. The difference in status between him and Catherine is no longer something that they can just ignore. On top of that, during her time at the Lintons, Catherine started getting up close and personal with Edgar, the son, so now they're kind of a thing. Then, things get even worse when Frances dies after giving birth to a son named Hareton, because this sends Hindley into an absolute spiral. He was abusive before, but now he's upgraded to an abusive alcoholic. Nobody's safe. Not Catherine, not Nellie, certainly not Heathcliff, and not even Hareton, his infant son, can escape his wrath. Hindley literally dangled his son from the banister of a staircase and dropped him, and the only reason that he didn't die on impact was because Heathcliff was there to catch him. Actually deranged behavior. So now we get into some real drama. I'm saying this like I didn't just talk about a father throwing his son down a flight of stairs a second ago. So like I said, Edgar and Catherine have been mingling for a little while now, and he did in fact actually propose to her, and she did in fact accept his proposal at the age of 15. She never tells this to Heathcliff directly, but he does overhear her telling Nellie. Now, this is his villain origin story. I mean, his whole life is his villain origin story, but this in particular really set him off because the reason she said that she couldn't marry Heathcliff was because of his status. It would degrade her to do so. And now Heathcliff and Catherine, they've had this like soul bond connection tie thing. Like Heathcliff is absolutely crazy about her, so hearing that she would never marry him and it would degrade her to do so was like absolutely knife to the heart, gut-wrenching stuff for him. So he heard that and immediately disappeared into the night, never to be seen again. But Catherine looked for him, even though it was a dark and stormy night, and even though the common cold was lethal back in the day. She fruitlessly searched all night for her man. However, she did not end up finding him, and of course she does end up getting sick, but luckily she did survive. However, she took some people down with her. She passed that sickness on to Mama and Father Linton, and they both died. That awkward moment when you accidentally kill your fiance's parents. Whoopsies! 3 years pass, and at the ripe age of 18, Catherine is now a married woman. But you know how they say he'll text you the second you're finally starting to move on? Like, he can just sense the exact moment to strike to bring your emotional downfall when you least expect it? Like the situationship prophecies foretold, Heathcliff makes his reappearance 6 months after Catherine's wedding. Mind you, she hasn't seen or heard from the man in 3 years, and now he's on her doorstep disturbing her peace, and you know what? She's absolutely eating that shit up. She was actually ecstatic to see him. And now she's over here thinking, man, I should have waited for fine shit, and now I'm shackled to this chuzz for life. Especially considering Heathcliff didn't get his funny up, but he sure did get his money up. How exactly? We don't know. Possibly through nefarious means, possibly through gambling, as you'll later see. But regardless, now he's a distinguished, wealthy gent. And now obviously he has major beef with Edgar because he married his woman and he was like, hey Edgar, you're playing checkers, I'm fucking your sister. That's right. What does he do? He starts entertaining the advances of Isabella, and then he actually elopes with her. Yeah. Now obviously Heathcliff doesn't really care for Isabella, but my man is on the most dastardly villain arc of all time. His heart is consumed by a desperate need for revenge. It's not enough for him to prey on the downfall of those who wronged him. Oh no, he needs to be directly involved, nay, the direct cause of everyone's downfall. He's going to make sure that everyone's miserable and rob them of every title and all the money they have so that they die with nothing, not even a shred of dignity or happiness within their cruel, bitter hearts. Nothing short of that will satisfy him. He will never be satisfied. Marrying Isabella was a fuck you to Edgar, of course. It also gave him some claim over Thrushcross Grange, and it was to get back at Catherine for marrying Edgar in the first place. He wanted to make fine shit jealous, and you best believe it worked. Catherine was so distressed about the current state of things that she refused to eat and effectively wills herself to the brink of death. And, fun fact, she's also with child. The night before she gives birth, Heathcliff goes to her bedside in secret and they share a moment of passion. They ask for forgiveness from each other, they embrace each other, they kiss, and then when Heathcliff has to depart, Catherine gives birth to a daughter, who she also names Catherine, and then the mother Catherine dies. I don't think anyone gets to be happy ever again after this moment. I'm so deadass. Like, the havoc that this man Heathcliff causes is absolutely diabolical. He really left no stone unturned. Catherine's death absolutely devastated him, and the man was never the same again. Firstly, let's talk about Isabella. She was miserable, stuck as Heathcliff's wife, and she was also stuck at Wuthering Heights, caught in the middle of this beef between two violent, deranged men, aka Heathcliff and Hindley, so she flees to London and gives birth to a son over there. His name is Linton Heathcliff, which is all types of confusing for me, because Linton is her last name, and then Heathcliff is Heathcliff's first name, so I have no idea how that worked out, but whatever. Then eventually she dies, and that was how her story ended. In terms of Hindley, on top of being an alcoholic, he also, say it with me now, developed a crippling gambling addiction. Hindley was straight up swindled by Heathcliff. He robbed him blind in his own home, and then when Hindley died, absolutely in debt and broke and just a shell of a human, Wuthering Heights fell to Heathcliff. Now, to recap, the only people left standing are Heathcliff and Edgar and the children. Those are the only people left alive. Everybody else is dead. Heathcliff and Hareton are living at Wuthering Heights. Hareton is a servant who, mind you, Heathcliff was purposefully trying to corrupt Hareton to the point of no return as he was growing up by teaching him bad habits and stripping him of his education. Sound familiar? Yes, that's because Heathcliff is taking out his grievances and his resentment towards Hindley out on Hindley's son, out on the next generation. He's treating Hareton like Hindley treated him. Edgar and his daughter Kathy are living at Thrushcross Grange, and she's forbidden from going to Wuthering Heights, obviously, because Edgar wants to keep his daughter far away from Heathcliff and his madness. Then finally, after Isabella's death, Linton is brought to Wuthering Heights. One day, Kathy ends up wandering over to Wuthering Heights and meets Heathcliff and the gang for the first time at the age of 13. Then, after this development, Heathcliff starts to matchmake. He's like, yes, this is perfect. Kathy and Linton should get together so that I can control Kathy's inheritance. Now, you may be doing some quick math in your head and are like, Amanda, aren't Kathy and Linton biological cousins? Well, yes. Anyways, they marry, Edgar dies, and then Linton dies. So now Kathy is a widow trapped at Wuthering Heights as Heathcliff descends into madness. He says he's haunted by Catherine's ghost. He literally digs up her grave multiple times. He's just doing his creepy shit, and that's kind of an interesting development in the novel because we get to see that supernatural gothic element, especially in his last moments. But Hareton and Kathy, they start to trauma bond, and they start to spend time together, and they start, falling in love, developing romantic feelings for each other. Originally, she looked down on him because of his status and illiteracy, but their shared time together at Wuthering Heights allowed them to grow close and, trauma bond in spite of that. Then, like I said, they fell in love and eventually did get married. Now you may be thinking, Amanda, isn't Hareton also Kathy's biological cousin? Well, yes. Yes, he is. Eventually, Heathcliff dies, and the couple reclaims Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, and everyone lives happily ever after. The end. I stand corrected. Two people did end up happy. Wasn't that an interesting read, y'all? Now, it's about to get AP lit up in here for a second. So, as you can see, one of the big themes is about how money, social status, and class can change people, alter perceptions, and cause divides. We see multiple characters gain newfound wealth and status, and then proceed to switch up on their day ones. Revenge is also a big theme. I mean, Heathcliff literally orchestrated the misery of those who wronged him and their children, which is crazy. He dragged the future generations into the mix. It was a multi-generational grudge here. There was also the cycle of abuse and how that manifests itself mainly in Hindley and Heathcliff. And one thing to keep in mind that I didn't really mention at all previously is how the story is actually told. Nellie is the servant slash housekeeper that I barely mentioned, and she played a pretty significant role in the story. She served time both at Wuthering Heights and at Thrushcross Grange. She was all up in everyone's business, and she has a first-hand account of a lot of the events that took place. So she's actually the one narrating and recounting the story to some random traveler dude named Mr. Lockwood. So if you think about it this way, just now, I was Nellie, and y'all were Mr. Lockwood. The entire novel was Nellie spilling the tea to Mr. Lockwood, like I just did to you guys, and as such, we gotta take into consideration the reliability, or lack thereof, of the narrator at times, so, that's a little bit of an interesting variable to analyze. Anyways, with all that being said, now you're Wuthering Heights experts, yay! So now you hear about an upcoming movie adaptation directed by Emerald Fennell, aka the director of Saltburn. Then you hear about casting decisions, Margot Robbie as Catherine and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, okay. Then finally you see the trailer for the movie. A lot of the dissatisfaction we're seeing online is due to the upcoming adaptation's lack of faithfulness to the original work. One detail that has not gone unnoticed is the fact that the title of the movie, Wuthering Heights, is in quotations. So already that's a sign that they're going to take some major creative liberties. Some details are arguably more minor. For example, now I'm not an expert on this subject at all, so if you would like to further elaborate in the comments, if you're passionate about this, please do so. But the costumes apparently are all over the place time-wise. There were complaints particularly about the wedding dress because both the silhouette and color don't match the trends that were going on at the time. Speaking of timing, another thing that stood out super quick upon hearing the casting decision was the actors' ages. If you recall, Catherine died very young, tragically, at the age of around 19, and the majority of the story between her and Heathcliff is when they were children and teens. So Margot Robbie is in fact 35 and Jacob Elordi is 28, so we're not really sure how that's going to work. Arguably these things we could look past for the sake of aesthetic or for a more modern retelling, right? However, now we're going to get into directorial changes in this upcoming adaptation that seem to completely take away from the original intent of the story. The big huge topic of conversation is the fact that Heathcliff is portrayed by a white man, aka Jacob Elordi. The exact ethnicity of Heathcliff has been a topic of speculation for forever, and you can technically cherry pick certain lines in the text in order to make an argument for whatever race you want, and many say that the author purposefully kept it ambiguous. If you're asking what my specific opinion and interpretation of the text is, I would say it seems pretty clear to me that Heathcliff isn't white. I'd be down for him to be anything but white, to be honest. Furthermore, for me, and in my opinion, it seems most likely that Heathcliff is Romani, based on racial slurs that were used to describe him in the book, as well as physical descriptors, such as the darkness of his complexion and facial features. And furthermore, there are multiple instances where Heathcliff is described as speaking in his native language, which is not English. So now, with this being such a tricky debate, because there are people arguing that Heathcliff could technically be Irish, because we're viewing this novel through the lens of today's times, and whiteness was kind of differently described back then, and there were it was, I guess, more strict of a definition. And so some people argue that the slurs and the words used to describe a person of color could actually also be used against a person of Irish descent. And there are even some people questioning whether Heathcliff being a person of color is even that significant to the story, because arguably the book is more a commentary on class than a commentary on race. I'd say that it seems very intentional that Heathcliff's physical appearance and ethnicity contributes to his sense of otherness that he can't escape from, and that in itself is integral to his character. And sure, you can argue that he can maintain his otherness and his described physical characteristics while still being white and discriminated against because of his class and appearance. And I agree, we have to keep in mind that the standard for otherness was different back in the day than it is today. But nobody in the book thinks that he's white. The white allegations don't come his way at all. It's literally any other race but white. But for whatever reason, people maintain the belief that Heathcliff is white and that the character's assumptions are just wrong. Maybe the reason that Heathcliff is described the way that he is because he actually is a person of color. Anyways, regardless of what he actually is, I feel like his experience is that of a person of color, right? So why, out of the many, many adaptations of Wuthering Heights, has he only been portrayed by a person of color once? That being in the 2011 movie adaptation. Especially nowadays, where Hollywood loves to racial swap for no apparent reason other than manufactured diversity, but when we actually have a story where the character was originally written as a person of color, we're jumping through hoops to make sure that the character is white when he clearly isn't? And on top of that, it's heartthrob Jacob fucking Elordi. Are you kidding? What I don't understand is, I'm not big on history, so I don't know what was happening back in the day, but I imagine that it would be significantly harder for a person of color to climb the socioeconomic ladder. So how does Heathcliff manage to do that in 3 years? How does that even work? I mean, I guess he didn't have to stay in England. We don't know where he went. It's all very mysterious. Any history buffs, how would a person of color go about doing that? Was it even possible? I mean, it probably was, but I just don't really know enough about that. So you may be wondering then, why was Jacob Elordi cast in spite of all of this? Well, according to the director, Emerald Fennell, she decided to cast Jacob basically to fulfill her own image of Heathcliff that she envisioned when she was 14. She said, and I quote, "He looked exactly like the illustration of Heathcliff on the first book that I read. I wanted to scream after noticing the resemblance. Not the professional thing to do, obviously. I'd been thinking about making Wuthering Heights, and it seemed to me like he had the thing. I wanted to focus on the sadomasochistic elements of the book. My take on Wuthering Heights is more of an inspiration. I can't say I'm making Wuthering Heights. It's not possible. What I can say is I'm making a version of it. Bitch, but you are. You are making Wuthering Heights. That is the title of your goddamn movie. Don't piss me off. So we had all of that outrage leading up to the trailer, and then when we finally got to catch a first glimpse from the trailer, oh my god. So I actually watched this trailer multiple times when it first dropped, having no idea at all what Wuthering Heights was even about, and here's what I gathered from that. We have this rich, innocent girl, Margot Robbie, and she's torn between a life of status and a life with the man she truly loves, who in contrast is poor and rugged and wild. But he became rich eventually, but she didn't wait for him. And there's lots of sex. Oh man, the people were not pleased when they saw this. They TikTok, Wattpad, smutified Wuthering Heights, bruh. Now, I haven't seen the movie yet, obviously, so I can't say for sure, but one of the other things that was actually super bothersome, of course, is the whitewashing of Heathcliff of it all. Of course, it's the fact that they're 30-year-olds running around pretending to be teenagers of it all. But it's also the fact that Margot Robbie's version of Catherine doesn't seem to fit, like, the character of Catherine that we know and love. But maybe it's too early to say. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of her. And Jacob's Heathcliff also doesn't seem to be, like, I don't want to say evil, because again, we see him go through all of this abuse and trauma, and we can understand why he turns into the monster that he does. I don't know. The vibes between these two characters were not what I got at all from the book. You know what I mean? Also, another thing about appearances, in the same way that Heathcliff's physical appearance juxtaposes those around him, with him most likely being a person of color and people low-key being racist to him like all the time and immediately like making assumptions about him based off of his physical appearance, which is like darker in complexion and, you know, dark hair, dark eyes. Catherine's brown hair and brown eyes are supposed to contrast that of the distinguished, civilized Lintons with their blonde hair and blue eyes. You know, especially when it gets to the children of these characters as well, the fairness, like the blonde hair, blue eye features, or lack thereof, was an important device to comment on classism and Eurocentrism and how they intersect. And so we completely lose that when you cast frickin' Margot Robbie as Catherine and you cast frickin' Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. There's a lot of problems, potentially. But, like Emerald said, this isn't Wuthering Heights. It's just called Wuthering Heights, but it's not Wuthering Heights, you dumb fuck. I can't believe you thought that the movie Wuthering Heights was actually going to be an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. Stupid. Here's the thing though. I'm not saying that we can't all enjoy the movie for what it is. Like, if I go into it and I watch it, I probably would have an okay, decent time. It's just annoying that they're leeching off of the name of the original work and then low-key defiling it by disrespecting the original story. Which brings me to the PR disaster of it all. A couple things that have been bugging people. Firstly, they're doing that annoying affair bait thing like they did with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell during the Anyone But You promo, except in Sydney and Glenn's case, I feel like the two actually did seem to have some chemistry. Jacob and Margot is genuinely not giving it all. It's honestly a little awkward and weird, especially with Margot being, you know, married with a kid and her husband's one of the producers. She's a producer too, by the way, and that's probably one of the main reasons she was cast, since her own production company is backing the film. But anyways, Margot has been talking about how Jacob is so romantic and filled her room with roses on Valentine's Day, but he did it in character as Heathcliff apparently, and she thinks he'd be a good boyfriend, and she said how she needed him on set like a kid needs their security blanket. I mean, I guess they're playing into the whole Catherine and Heathcliff mutual obsession thing of it all, but again, the whole thing is just weirding people out. Then we have Margot repeating the "it ends with us" PR downfall by saying to grab your girlfriends for Galentine's to watch Wuthering Heights.
Do you think it really is the perfect date night for Valentine's Day, a steamy date night?
It's a perfect date night. It's perfect Galentine's, it's perfect Valentine's, yeah, it's a great night out.
Which was reminiscent of Blake Lively saying to grab your friends and florals to watch a movie about domestic violence. My whole question is, since when has it been a trend to straight up clickbait people by not being transparent about what your movie is actually about? Like, you're trying to get people into the theaters and then trap them there so that they can't leave when they're watching a completely different movie than what you advertised it to be. And it doesn't matter because they already bought the tickets and they're already in the theater, so what are they going to do about it? Like, that's just so annoying. The thing with Wuthering Heights though is that they could very well be telling the truth, since, you know, this version of Wuthering Heights is removed from the original story. Like, it does seem to be like a trashy camp chick flick at this point that would warrant a wine night with friends, so maybe they're not wrong. But again, like, then it's just annoying because... But it's not Wuthering Heights then. Now let's get into the movie's portrayal of Catherine Heathcliff, and particularly how they really upped the eroticism and whatnot. And here's the thing. I've seen a lot of people on TikTok minimize the role that love and romance plays in the actual original Wuthering Heights story. And I understand that in part because the majority of the book, the vibes are tragedy, abuse, revenge, but there's also like supernatural elements, gothic, like there's a lot of things going on. It's not a super erotic book, and the characters especially aren't super physically affectionate with each other, and the main love story between Catherine and Heathcliff is super toxic, but that's not to say that love doesn't play a significant role in this story. Like, in the book, Catherine and Heathcliff had this soulmate level connection going on. It was giving Aaron and Mikasa, like, yes, technically they are adoptive siblings, but there was a mutual, like, sort of a little bit of distance and tension that always kept them curious and interested in each other in a romantic way, in like a crush romantic way. And like I said, they were also trauma bonded, and they wanted to escape their abusive household. And even though Catherine admitted that she could never marry Heathcliff, and then Heathcliff ran away, he actually ran away before hearing the second part of Catherine's confession, where she devoted her undying and all-consuming love for him, and how she was actually going to help Heathcliff out financially after marrying Edgar. Also, they did kiss in the book. They did. I've seen a lot of misinformation about that. The eroticism for sure seems to be dialed up to 1,000,000 in comparison in the movie adaptation. Catherine and Heathcliff were not going at it like that in the book. I'll just say that. But man, sometimes y'all piss me off by spreading misinformation in the comments. Like, why is it that when people aren't sure of something, they don't preface it by saying like, oh, I think that this, or oh, I'm pretty sure blank. If you state something like it's a fact, at least make sure that what you're saying is correct. I've seen multiple comments on TikTok that say that Catherine and Heathcliff don't kiss in the book at all, not even once, and one such comment had 30,000 likes. They did kiss though, like that's just plain wrong. I read the words myself, and not that it really matters, it's a difference between 0 kisses and like 1 night of kissing, but it really bothers me when people see one TikTok comment and run with it like it's a fact, and it happens all the time. Anyways, sorry about that rant. So yes, a large part of the book is the connection between Catherine and Heathcliff, and also the connection between the other characters as well, like, you know, when we get into the younger generation too. And all of these connections were romantic at times, sure. However, sometimes, especially with Catherine and Heathcliff, they were also toxic and vindictive and jealous, and they dragged everyone into their shit unnecessarily and ruined families and ruined everybody's lives. It's definitely not a relationship to be romanticized, which the movie promo is actively doing. From the Charlie XCX soundtrack to the TikToks, y'all need to see this shit. POV. The tension is mutual. If you love close proximity. For the jealousy trope lovers. For the friends to lovers fans. Friends to lovers? Friends to lovers? Are we being fucking for real? We're talking about Catherine and Heathcliff. No, right. You're being so feral. God forbid a girl appreciate a fictional character. What? We're supposed to be appreciating Heathcliff. Why exactly? Because Jacob Elordi is hot? No, but Amanda, you don't understand. Heathcliff is a yearner, and a man who yearns is a man who earns, right? Well, I agree. He does yearn. Yearns to torment and harass his own bloodline. Also, one more thing that I noticed. Underneath the Wuthering Heights official trailer, it says inspired by the greatest love story of all time. And I was looking at the movie posters for the older renditions of Wuthering Heights, like the film adaptation in 1920, it says Emily Bronte's tremendous story of hate. And then the 1939 movie poster says, I'm torn with desire, tortured by hate. I feel like that just sums it up pretty well. I honestly had no thoughts or opinions until very recently when I started looking into all of this stuff. And of course now I'm all hot and bothered, but you know, like I said, this movie is rage baiting me and I'm falling for it. So it seems like we have to view this movie in a completely different light. It's a completely different entity from the original work, even though it's actively leeching off of its namesake to be successful. It is what it is, I guess. This is Hollywood. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to feel something, go watch the Kate Bush Wuthering Heights music videos. You will have a hoot and a half, I promise. I love you, Pookies. I'll see you next time. Bye!